The Grand Senate chamber was the largest meeting hall in the known galaxy. Thousands of lights glowed above rows of floating platforms where representatives from hundreds of alien worlds gathered to discuss matters of war, trade, and peace. The room was never truly silent. There were always voices, always arguments, always pride. Today was no different. At the center of the chamber stood a single human, Ambassador David Kane of Earth. He looked small compared to many of the giant alien delegates around him. Some species towered over him. Others sat inside armored life support shells. A few were nothing more than glowing energy forms. Yet David Kane stood calmly before them all. He had delivered many speeches in this chamber before. Most had been ignored. This one would be no different. At least that was what the Senate believed. The Speaker of the Senate, a massive gray-skinned Vorten named Relgor, struck his staff against the floor. The chamber became quiet. "Ambassador Kane, you requested this emergency session," Relgor said. "You may speak." David nodded slowly. His face was serious, far more serious than usual. For a moment he looked around the room. He saw curiosity, he saw boredom, and he saw many faces already preparing to dismiss whatever he was about to say. Then he spoke. "The United Government of Earth has issued a final warning to all member states of the Galactic Senate." The room remained quiet. A fleet operation is being prepared near the dark zone beyond the Sol frontier. Several delegates exchanged looks. Others rolled their eyes. The dark zone again. Humans had been warning everyone about that region for decades. No one understood why. David continued. "Earth strongly advises all fleets to stay away from that area." A few delegates laughed softly. One of them raised a claw. "The human warning again?" he said. More laughter spread through the chamber. David ignored it. "The danger is real," he said. "We are asking every government to cancel all military and scientific operations in that region immediately." A tall blue-skinned senator named Varesh stood up. He represented the powerful Thar Dominion, one of the largest military powers in the galaxy. His voice echoed through the hall. "Ambassador Kane, for 30 years humanity has claimed this region is dangerous." He spread his arms dramatically. "Yet you have never provided evidence." Many delegates nodded. Varesh smiled. "Perhaps Earth simply wishes to keep valuable resources for itself." The chamber erupted with agreement. Several representatives began speaking at once. "Exactly. They hide something. The humans want control of the frontier." David waited patiently. When the noise settled, he spoke again. "If resources were our goal, we would not be standing here warning you." Varesh laughed. "Then show us proof." "Not all proof can be shared." The chamber instantly filled with mocking sounds. Relgor leaned forward. "That is a convenient answer, Ambassador." David's expression never changed. "Believe what you want." The calmness in his voice somehow made the room even more irritated. A senator from the Zalari Union pointed toward him. "Humanity always speaks in riddles," another shouted. "If there is danger, explain it." David remained silent for several seconds. Then he answered, "Because if we explain everything, some of you will go there even faster." That statement caused another wave of laughter. Varesh shook his head. "Listen to yourself, human. You expect the entire Senate to change its plans because of stories and rumors?" David looked directly at him. "No." The answer surprised everyone. Varesh frowned. "No? No," David repeated. "I expect you to ignore me." The chamber became strangely quiet. David continued, "I expect you to laugh. I expect you to think Earth is hiding something. I expect you to do exactly what you have always done." Several senators shifted uncomfortably. There was something unusual about the human's tone. He did not sound angry. He sounded tired. Very tired. Relgor narrowed his eyes. "If that is true, why come here at all?" David took a slow breath. "Because history matters." The room remained silent. "Because when this is over, no one will be able to say humanity failed to warn you." For the first time, a few delegates looked concerned. The confidence in David's voice felt different. There was no fear, no desperation, only certainty. Varesh noticed it too. "What exactly are you saying?" David met his gaze. "I am saying this is Earth's final warning." The words echoed across the chamber. No one laughed this time. A strange tension filled the room. Then Varesh crossed his arms. "You speak as though you know something." David answered immediately. "We do." The room exploded with questions. "What do you know? What is in the dark zone? What are you hiding?" David simply shook his head. "I cannot answer those questions." The senators groaned in frustration. Relgor slammed his staff against the floor. "Order." The chamber quieted once more. Relgor stared at the human. "The Senate has heard your warning. Do you have anything else to add?" David looked around the room one last time. At every representative, every government, every empire. Then he spoke slowly. "If your fleets enter the dark zone, humanity will not save them." A chill moved through the chamber. The sentence sounded less like a threat and more like a fact. David stepped away from the center platform. His speech was finished. The Senate immediately began debating. Some called the warning nonsense. Others demanded investigations. A few argued that humanity clearly knew something important, but the most powerful voices belonged to the great military empires, and those empires were not interested in caution, they were interested in victory. Within an hour, the Senate reached its decision. The exploration mission would continue. 3 massive fleets would enter the Dark Zone. The fleets belonged to the Thar Dominion, the Zalari Union, and the Korvac Collective. Together they represented one of the largest military forces ever assembled. When the decision became official, Varesh smiled proudly. "The frontier belongs to those brave enough to claim it." Many senators applauded. Across the chamber, David Kane quietly gathered his documents. A young aide standing beside him looked nervous. "Sir," she whispered. "Should we say something else?" David looked toward the celebrating senators. "No. But they don't understand." "I know." The aide hesitated. "What happens now?" For a few seconds, David said nothing. Then he looked toward the distant stars visible through the chamber's transparent ceiling. His eyes seemed focused on something far away, something only humanity understood. Finally, he spoke. "Now we wait." Hours later, the 3 great fleets crossed into the Dark Zone. Millions of crew members reported normal conditions. Everything appeared calm. Everything appeared safe. Then, without warning, every signal disappeared. No distress call, no battle report, no emergency beacon, nothing. 3 of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy simply vanished. And in the Senate chamber, where laughter had filled the room only hours earlier, silence finally arrived. The first reports arrived only minutes after the fleets vanished. At first, nobody panicked. Communication failures happened in deep space all the time. A damaged relay, a solar storm, a navigation problem. There were dozens of possible explanations. The Galactic Senate believed one of them had to be the answer. After all, entire fleets did not simply disappear. That was impossible. Or so they thought. Inside the Senate's Central Command Center, hundreds of officers rushed between glowing consoles. Messages were sent, channels were opened, emergency frequencies were activated. Yet every screen showed the same result. No response, no signal, no contact. The 3 fleets had gone completely silent. Senator Varesh stood near the command platform, watching the reports arrive. His confidence from earlier was already fading. "Try again," he ordered. An officer nodded. "We have tried every frequency, Senator." "Then try them again." Minutes passed, then an hour, still nothing. The silence remained. Across the galaxy, news began spreading. Citizens watched emergency broadcasts. Military analysts debated possible explanations. Some believed pirates had attacked. Others suspected a secret enemy weapon. But nobody truly knew. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador David Kane sat inside a secure conference room beneath the United Government Complex. Several military leaders stood around a large holographic table. No one looked surprised. A gray-haired admiral studied a star map. "The fleets crossed the boundary at 14:03 Galactic Standard Time," he said. David nodded. "And?" "They disappeared 7 minutes later." The room became quiet. A younger officer swallowed nervously. Exactly like before. Nobody answered him, because everyone knew he was right. Exactly like before, far away inside the Senate Command Center, the situation continued to worsen. Another officer approached Relgor. The Speaker of the Senate looked exhausted. "What is it?" he asked. "We have lost contact with 2 long-range observation satellites." Relgor frowned. "What do you mean lost contact?" "They stopped transmitting after focusing on the dark zone." The speaker's face darkened. "Both of them?" "Yes." For the first time that day, genuine fear appeared in the room. This was no ordinary communication failure. Something was wrong. Very wrong. An emergency meeting was called immediately. Within hours, representatives from hundreds of worlds appeared through holographic links. The mood was completely different from the previous session. Nobody was laughing now. Nobody was making jokes about humanity. Relgor stood before the assembly. "We are facing an unknown situation." His voice sounded strained. "The fleets remain unresponsive." Murmurs spread through the chamber. A senator from a smaller world spoke up. "Should we ask Earth for assistance?" The room became quiet. Several delegates exchanged uncomfortable looks. Only a few hours earlier they had ignored humanity's warning. Now they were considering asking for help. Varesh quickly stood. "No." Everyone turned toward him. "The Thar Dominion does not require human assistance." His words sounded strong, but his face told a different story. He was worried, perhaps more worried than anyone. Another senator crossed her arms. "And if the humans were right?" Varesh immediately answered, "They are not." Yet even he seemed unconvinced by his own response. Relgor raised his hand. "Enough. We need information." He turned toward the command officers. "What assets remain near the dark zone?" An officer checked several displays. "We have 24 unmanned survey drones within operational range." Relgor nodded. "Send them." The order was carried out immediately. Within minutes, 24 advanced drones accelerated toward the region where the fleets had vanished. The Senate watched their progress in real time. At first, everything appeared normal. The drones transmitted images of empty space, stars, dust clouds. Nothing unusual. Hope slowly returned. Perhaps the fleets had simply experienced a massive communications failure. Perhaps there was a rational explanation after all. Then the first drone disappeared. Its signal vanished instantly. No warning, no malfunction report, just silence. Several officers stared at their screens. What happened? Nobody knew. Seconds later, a second drone disappeared. Then a third, then a fourth. The command center erupted into chaos. "Signal lost. Drone 12 is gone. We lost another one. 3 more just vanished." The operators could barely keep up. One by one, every drone disappeared. 24 advanced machines worth billions of credits vanished exactly like the fleets, without a trace, without a message, without a clue. When the final signal died, the room became completely silent. No one spoke, no one moved. Fear had finally arrived. Hours later, an encrypted message reached the Senate from Earth. The sender was Ambassador David Kane. Relgor opened the communication personally. David appeared on the screen. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Relgor stared at him. "You knew this would happen." David did not deny it. "We warned you." Relgor clenched his jaw. "What happened to those fleets?" David remained silent. The pause felt endless. Finally, he answered, "We don't know exactly." This statement surprised everyone. "You don't know?" Relgor asked. "No." David leaned slightly forward. "And that should frighten you more than anything else." The room fell silent again, because everyone understood what he meant. Humanity knew enough to fear the dark zone, yet even humanity did not fully understand it. Relgor lowered his voice. "What are we supposed to do now?" For the first time, David looked genuinely troubled. "Pray the boundary remains stable." Several senators exchanged confused looks. "Boundary?" one asked. "What boundary?" David immediately realized he had said too much, but it was already too late. The question hung in the air. A boundary between what and what? Before anyone could ask another question, an officer suddenly rushed into the command center. His face was pale. "Speaker Relgor." Relgor turned. "What is it?" The officer pointed toward the main display. A deep space monitoring station had detected something unusual, something moving inside the dark zone. At first, it appeared to be a simple signal distortion. Then the image sharpened. The entire room froze. The object was enormous, far larger than any known ship, far larger than a space station. Its shape was impossible to understand, as if the sensors themselves could not properly see it. The recording lasted only 3 seconds. Then the monitoring station went dark. The last image remained frozen on the giant screen. And for the first time in centuries, the leaders of the galaxy felt true fear. Because whatever had taken the fleets, it was no longer hiding. And somewhere beyond the darkness, something had just started moving. The giant image remained frozen on the Senate's main screen. No one spoke. No one moved. The room felt colder than before. Hundreds of senators stared at the impossible shape floating inside the dark zone. Some believed it was a ship. Others believed it was a space station. A few thought it might be a sensor error. But deep inside, everyone knew the truth. That thing was real, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Speaker Relgor slowly stepped toward the display. "Magnify the image," he ordered. The technicians obeyed immediately. The blurry shape became larger. The details were still difficult to understand. Parts of the object seemed solid. Other parts appeared to fade in and out of existence, as if reality itself struggled to look at it. A nervous scientist adjusted her scanner. "I've never seen readings like this." "What do you mean?" Relgor asked. She swallowed. "The object's size changes every time we measure it." The room became silent. "What is its actual size?" a senator asked. The scientist looked down at her data. "We don't know." The answer made several delegates uncomfortable. One measurement suggested the object was the size of a moon. Another suggested it was larger than a planet. Every scan gave a different result. Nothing made sense. Far away on Earth, Ambassador David Kane watched the same image from a secure military facility. Around him sat senior officers, scientists, and intelligence officials. Nobody looked surprised, only worried. An elderly scientist named Dr. Evelyn Ross stared at the display. Her face had become pale. "I was hoping we would never see this again." A young officer turned toward her. "You've seen it before?" The room became quiet. Dr. Ross nodded slowly. 32 years ago." The officer's eyes widened. "The first expedition?" She nodded again. A heavy silence filled the room. "The first expedition." Very few people outside Earth knew about it. Even fewer knew what had happened. David crossed his arms. "Tell them everything." Dr. Ross looked around the room. Then she began. 32 years ago, humanity discovered strange energy readings near the dark zone. At that time, we thought it was a natural phenomenon. So we sent a research fleet. The room listened carefully. 7 ships entered the region. "What happened?" the young officer asked. Dr. Ross hesitated, then answered quietly, 6 never returned." The room became silent. The 7th ship came back 3 months later. Only 12 crew members survived. The officer frowned. "What attacked them?" Dr. Ross slowly shook her head. "We never found evidence of an attack. No weapons damage. No enemy ships. No signs of battle." The mystery only grew deeper. David stared at the image on the screen. "What did the survivors report?" Dr. Ross took a deep breath. "The same thing we are seeing now." Everyone looked back at the giant object. A chill spread through the room. Meanwhile, inside the Senate, panic was slowly growing. Military commanders demanded answers. Scientists demanded more scans. Politicians demanded someone to blame. But nobody had answers. The only thing they had was fear. Senator Varesh stood before the assembly. His face looked very different from the confident man who had mocked humanity only hours earlier. "What if this is a human weapon?" one senator suddenly asked. Several heads turned. The accusation spread quickly. It appeared after their warning. They knew about it. Maybe they created it. For a moment, the idea seemed possible. Then another senator shook his head. If humanity possessed such power, they would already control the galaxy. The room fell quiet. Because everyone knew that was true, Relgor activated a direct communication channel to Earth. Moments later, David Kane appeared on the massive screen. The speaker wasted no time. Ambassador Kane, what exactly is that thing? David looked at the image. For several seconds he said nothing. Finally, he answered. We don't know its name. A wave of frustration swept through the chamber. You keep saying that, Varesh snapped. You know something. David met his gaze. Yes. Then tell us. David's voice remained calm. We know it exists. We know it appears inside the dark zone. We know fleets disappear whenever they get too close. And we know one more thing. The room leaned forward. Relgor narrowed his eyes. What? David's expression hardened. It wasn't active before. A cold silence followed. Nobody liked the sound of that. What do you mean active? Relgor asked. David pointed toward the image. 32 years ago, it remained stationary. It never moved. It never reacted. It simply existed. Several senators exchanged worried looks. And now? Varesh asked. David looked directly into the camera. Now it's moving. The chamber exploded with nervous voices. Moving. The giant object was moving. Something that had remained dormant for decades had suddenly awakened. Relgor slammed his staff against the floor. Silence! The room quieted. He turned back to David. Why now? David answered with a question of his own. How many ships entered the dark zone today? 3 fleets, Relgor replied. David slowly nodded. More vessels entered that region today than in the previous 50 years combined. No one liked where this conversation was going. A scientist stepped forward. Are you suggesting we woke it up? David did not answer immediately. That silence was answer enough. Hours passed as researchers continued studying the image. Then suddenly an alert sounded across the Senate command center. Every screen flashed red. An operator jumped from his chair. Speaker Relgor. What now? Relgor demanded. The operator pointed at the display. We recovered data from one of the lost observation stations. The room instantly became silent. Show us. The recording appeared on the giant screen. At first there was only static. Then the image cleared. The enormous object filled the view. Closer than before, much closer. Gasps spread across the room. For the first time, details became visible. The surface was covered with structures, gigantic structures, towers, bridges, openings, patterns. The object was not a ship. It was not a station. It was something far more terrifying. It was a machine, an artificial construct built by intelligence, an intelligence powerful enough to create something larger than worlds. Then the recording changed. One section of the structure suddenly lit up. A bright white glow spread across its surface. The light grew stronger, and stronger, and stronger, until it filled the entire screen. The transmission ended instantly. Every monitor in the command center went black. The room became deathly silent. Then another alarm sounded, louder than the first. An officer looked at the incoming report. His face turned pale. Speaker. Relgor stepped forward. What is it? The officer could barely speak. The object. What about it? The officer looked at the screen, then at the terrified senators around him. Finally, he whispered, It's no longer inside the dark zone. And across the galaxy, fear became panic. Panic spread across the Galactic Senate like a wildfire. The impossible machine was no longer inside the dark zone. Every senator stared at the report in disbelief. Some demanded new scans, others accused the sensors of malfunctioning. But the answer was always the same. The readings were correct. The object had moved. For the first time in recorded history, something from the dark zone had crossed the boundary. Speaker Relgor stood silently at the center of the chamber. He could feel fear growing in the room, not fear of war, not fear of political failure. This was something different. This was fear of the unknown, a feeling many advanced civilizations had forgotten long ago. Then another report arrived. An officer rushed toward the command platform. "Speaker Relgor." "What is it now?" Relgor asked. The officer looked nervous. "We have tracked the object's direction." The room became quiet. "And?" Relgor pressed. The officer swallowed. "It is moving toward the inner galaxy." Suddenly, dozens of voices erupted at once. "What does it want? Can it be stopped? How fast is it moving? Where is it heading?" No one had answers. Relgor raised his hand. Silence. The chamber slowly calmed. Then he made a decision he never thought he would make. Open a secure channel to Earth. Within minutes, Ambassador David Kane appeared on the giant screen. Unlike the senators, he looked prepared, as if he had expected this moment for years. Relgor stared at him. "No more secrets, Ambassador. The galaxy deserves the truth." David remained silent for several seconds. Then he slowly nodded. "You're right." The chamber instantly became quiet. Everyone leaned forward. For the first time, humanity was ready to speak. David took a deep breath. "What I am about to tell you has been classified by Earth for over 30 years. The giant screen behind him changed. A star map appeared. The map zoomed toward the dark zone. Several highlighted routes became visible. Relgor frowned. "What are those?" David answered. "The paths of humanity's first expedition." The room listened carefully. 32 years earlier, before humanity had officially joined the Galactic Senate, Earth discovered strange signals coming from beyond known space. Scientists believed they had found evidence of an ancient civilization. Excitement spread across Earth. A large exploration mission was approved. 7 advanced ships were sent into the dark zone. The mission was expected to last 6 months. Instead, it became humanity's greatest nightmare. The star map continued moving. One by one, 6 ships vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors, nothing. The chamber remained completely silent. Several senators remembered mocking humans for warning the galaxy. Now those warnings sounded very different. David continued. The 7th ship was called Horizon. It was the only vessel that returned. The screen changed again. An old image appeared. A damaged spacecraft floated through darkness. Its hull was scarred and broken. Entire sections were missing. A senator stared at the image. "How many survived?" David's voice became quieter. 12. The room fell silent. The ship had launched with more than 400 crew members. Only 12 came home. A new image appeared. Several tired faces looked back at the Senate. The survivors. Their eyes looked haunted. Even after 30 years, the fear was still visible. Relgor crossed his arms. "What happened to them?" David glanced toward someone standing off-screen. Moments later, an elderly woman stepped forward. Several senators recognized her immediately. Dr. Evelyn Ross, the scientist who had spoken about the first expedition. She looked directly into the camera. "I was there." The chamber became silent once more. "You survived?" Relgor asked. Dr. Ross nodded. "Barely." Then she began telling the story. The Horizon had entered the dark zone after the other 6 ships disappeared. Their mission changed from exploration to rescue. They searched for weeks. At first, everything seemed normal. The stars were visible. Their equipment worked. Their engines functioned perfectly. Then strange things started happening. Crew members reported seeing lights in empty space. Shadows moved where nothing existed. Voices appeared on communication channels that should have been silent. At first, everyone blamed stress. Then the impossible events became impossible to ignore. One crew member entered a storage room. Minutes later, he came running out screaming. He claimed he had seen another version of himself standing inside, a version that smiled and vanished. Several senators exchanged uncomfortable looks. The story sounded insane, yet nobody laughed. Not anymore, Dr. Ross continued. The deeper we traveled, the stranger everything became. Time itself stopped behaving normally. A scientist inside the Senate leaned forward. What do you mean? Dr. Ross answered. Some clocks moved faster than others. Entire hours disappeared. People remembered conversations that never happened. The room grew colder. Even hearing the story felt wrong. Then her expression darkened. That was before we saw it. Nobody needed to ask what she meant. The machine, the giant structure, the thing now moving toward the galaxy. Dr. Ross looked down for a moment, as if remembering something terrible. When we first saw it, nobody spoke. It filled the sky. It was larger than anything we could understand. The Senate chamber remained silent. Every person listened carefully. What did it do? Relgor asked. Dr. Ross slowly shook her head. Nothing. The answer surprised everyone. It simply watched us. A chill passed through the room. Watched, not attacked, not chased. Watched. Then Dr. Ross revealed the most frightening detail. The machine knew we were there before we saw it. Several senators frowned. How can you know that? She looked directly into the camera. Because it spoke to us. The chamber erupted into shocked voices. Relgor's eyes widened. It spoke? Dr. Ross nodded. Not through radio transmissions. Not through speakers. It appeared inside our minds. The room instantly fell silent again. Every senator stared at her. What did it say? Relgor asked. Dr. Ross hesitated. For a moment she looked afraid. Even after 32 years, the memory still terrified her. Finally she answered. It asked a question. What question? Someone whispered. Dr. Ross looked toward the camera, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you here? The chamber remained frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. Then another screen suddenly flashed red. Emergency alarms echoed across the command center. An officer jumped from his station. His face had turned completely pale. Speaker Relgor. Relgor spun around. What happened now? The officer pointed toward a deep space monitoring display. The giant machine had changed direction. A new trajectory line appeared across the map. The room watched in horror as the destination marker blinked repeatedly. Then the computer confirmed the calculation. The object was not heading toward random star systems. It was heading toward a specific target, a target that made every senator's blood run cold. The destination was Earth, and according to the latest calculations, it would arrive in less than 48 hours. The words echoed through the Senate command center like a death sentence. The destination is Earth. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The giant machine had left the dark zone. It had crossed a boundary that humanity feared for decades, and now it was traveling directly toward Earth. Panic exploded across the chamber. Senators shouted over one another. Military commanders demanded emergency meetings. News networks across the galaxy interrupted every broadcast. Within minutes, billions of citizens learned the terrifying truth. Something unknown was coming, and nobody knew how to stop it. Speaker Relgor slammed his staff against the floor. Order! The chamber slowly became quiet. He turned toward the giant screen where David Kane stood waiting. Ambassador. His voice was tense. Why is it going to Earth? David remained silent. The question was one humanity had feared for more than 30 years. Finally, he answered, We don't know. The room erupted again. Relgor's expression hardened. That answer is no longer acceptable. David nodded slowly. I understand. Then tell us what you do know. For a moment, David looked away from the camera, as if choosing his words carefully. Then he spoke. We believe the machine noticed humanity during the first expedition. The chamber fell silent. We entered its territory. We survived, and we left. A senator frowned. Why would that matter? David looked directly into the camera. Because no one else ever came back. A cold silence followed. Nobody liked hearing that. Humanity might be the only civilization the machine had ever allowed to leave, and now it was coming to find them. Far away on Earth, emergency preparations had already begun. Military fleets launched from orbital stations, planetary defenses activated across the solar system, civilian evacuation plans were reviewed. But deep inside the government command center, few people believed weapons would matter. Dr. Evelyn Ross stood before a large holographic display. The machine's path glowed bright red across the stars. An admiral crossed his arms. "Can we stop it?" Dr. Ross slowly shook her head. "We don't even know what it is." The room became silent. A younger officer looked nervous. "Then what do we do?" Before anyone could answer, another alert appeared. One of Earth's deep space listening stations had detected a signal. Every person in the room froze. The signal was coming from the machine. An operator quickly analyzed the transmission. His eyes widened. "It's not random noise." "What is it?" David asked. The operator looked stunned. "It's repeating the same pattern over and over." The room became quiet. "Can you translate it?" The operator nodded. Minutes passed as computers worked through the impossible signal. Then suddenly the translation appeared. Everyone stared at the screen. Nobody spoke. The message contained only 3 words: "We remember you." A chill swept through the room. Several officers looked toward Dr. Ross. Her face had gone pale. The machine remembered humanity. After 32 years, it still remembered. Across the galaxy, fear continued growing. Entire star systems declared states of emergency. Trade routes shut down. Civilian traffic was restricted. Even powerful empires that once mocked Earth's warning were now preparing for the worst. Meanwhile, Senate scientists searched ancient records for answers. Thousands of archives were opened. Millions of forgotten documents were examined. Most revealed nothing. Then a discovery changed everything. A research team from the archives of Valora found references to similar disappearances. The records were ancient, older than most civilizations currently living in the galaxy. A historian rushed into the Senate chamber carrying the recovered files. Speaker Relgor immediately ordered him forward. "What did you find?" The historian activated a holographic display. Several ancient star maps appeared. The room watched carefully. "There have been other disappearances." The chamber became silent. "What do you mean?" Relgor asked. The historian pointed at the maps. "These records describe entire civilizations vanishing after entering restricted regions of space." Several senators exchanged worried looks. "How many civilizations?" One asked. The historian swallowed. "We don't know." The answer sent another wave of fear through the room. He zoomed the map outward. More markers appeared. Then more, and more, and more. The Senate watched in horror. Entire sectors of the galaxy had gone silent throughout history. Some civilizations disappeared millions of years ago. Others vanished only thousands of years ago. But every case shared one detail. Before they disappeared, they entered forbidden regions. Regions connected to strange machines. The room became deathly silent. A senator finally spoke. "How many machines are there?" The historian looked down at the data, then slowly answered, "We don't know that either." Nobody liked that answer, because one machine was already terrifying. The possibility of many was far worse. Hours later, another emergency report arrived. This time from a border monitoring station, an officer rushed toward the command platform. His breathing was heavy. "Speaker Relgor." The speaker immediately stood. "What happened?" The officer pointed toward the display. A long-range sensor network had detected something impossible. The giant machine was no longer alone. The room became completely silent. The display zoomed in. Several new contacts appeared behind the first object. At first they looked tiny. Then the scale adjusted. Gasps filled the chamber. They weren't small at all. They were enormous. Dozens of additional objects had emerged from the dark zone, each one larger than moons, each one moving toward the galaxy. The fear inside the chamber became overwhelming. One senator whispered the question everyone was thinking. Is this an invasion? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. At that exact moment, another transmission arrived from the leading machine. The message was stronger this time, clearer, more direct. The Senate Command Center, Earth's military headquarters, and hundreds of listening stations received it simultaneously. The translation appeared on every screen. Every person who read it felt their heart sink. The message contained only one sentence. The observation period is over. Silence filled the room. No one understood exactly what it meant, but everyone understood one thing. Whatever had been watching the galaxy for countless ages, it had finally made a decision. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the stars, something far greater than war was beginning. The message spread across the galaxy within minutes. The observation period is over. Every government received it, every military command analyzed it, every news network broadcast it, yet nobody understood what it truly meant. What observation? Who had been watching? And why had the observation ended now? Fear turned into desperation. For the first time in centuries, the great powers of the galaxy stopped arguing with each other. They wanted answers. Only one civilization seemed to know anything about the machines, humanity. An emergency session of the Galactic Senate was called immediately. This time there was no laughter, no mockery, no pride. The chamber was filled with fear. Speaker Relgor stood before the assembly. Then he looked toward the giant screen. Ambassador Kane, the galaxy deserves the entire truth. David Kane slowly nodded. He had expected this moment. The secrets Earth had hidden for decades could no longer remain hidden. Behind him, a massive secure archive appeared on the screen. Classified files, restricted reports, records that only a handful of people had ever seen. David took a deep breath. Then he began. 32 years ago, when the Horizon returned from the Dark Zone, the survivors brought back more than memories. The chamber became silent. They brought back data. A holographic image appeared. The giant machine filled the screen. Thousands of structures covered its surface. The scale was impossible to understand. David pointed toward the image. This machine is not a ship. It is not a station. It is part of something much larger. Several senators exchanged nervous looks. How much larger? Relgor asked. David activated another image. The chamber fell silent. The machine was only one object among hundreds, perhaps thousands. A massive network stretched across unknown regions of space. Ancient structures connected through impossible distances. The room watched in horror. "What is this?" someone whispered. David answered, "We call them the Watchers." The name echoed through the chamber. The Watchers are older than every known civilization. Older than the Senate. Older than our recorded history. Possibly older than the galaxy itself. A scientist stood up. "That is impossible." David looked at him calmly. "So is everything else we have seen." No one argued. Not anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming. David continued. "Our scientists spent decades studying the Horizon's recovered data. We discovered patterns, records, fragments of information left behind by species that came before us. The screen changed again. Ancient symbols appeared. Ruined cities, destroyed worlds, dead civilizations. A chill moved through the chamber. "What happened to them?" Relgor asked. David's expression darkened. "They were erased." The room became silent. A senator frowned. "Erased by whom?" David pointed toward the image of the machine. "By the Watchers." Several voices rose at once. "Why? For what reason? What crime did they commit?" David answered with a single sentence. "They entered places they were never meant to enter." The chamber became deathly quiet. The statement sounded horrifyingly familiar, because that was exactly what the vanished fleets had done. A military commander leaned forward. "Are you saying the Watchers guard forbidden regions?" David nodded. "Yes. They monitor civilizations. They observe growth. They record development. And when certain boundaries are crossed, they act." The room felt colder. A senator shook his head. "This makes no sense. Why would they care about us?" David looked toward the camera. "We asked the same question." The screen changed once more. A recovered log from the horizon appeared. The recording was damaged. Static filled the audio. Then a voice emerged. Not human, not alien, something else. Something ancient. The chamber listened in complete silence. The translated message appeared beneath the recording. Observation active. Static followed, then another phrase. Civilization under review. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Several senators looked pale. The implication was terrifying. The galaxy itself had been under observation. For how long? No one knew. By whom? The Watchers? For what purpose? Nobody knew that either. Then Relgor asked the question everyone feared. Why was humanity spared? The room became silent. David looked down for several seconds, then answered, Because we left. The chamber frowned in confusion. David continued. The horizon encountered the machine. It spoke to us. It asked why we were there. We answered honestly. Several senators leaned forward. What did you say? David looked directly into the camera. We told it we came seeking knowledge. The room remained silent. We admitted we were afraid. We admitted we didn't understand what we had found. And then we turned around and left. A long silence followed. Finally, Dr. Evelyn Ross stepped forward. The other civilizations didn't leave. Every eye turned toward her, she continued. The recovered records tell the same story over and over. They found forbidden regions. They ignored warnings. They pushed deeper. They wanted power. They wanted technology. They wanted control. The room remembered the fleets that had entered the dark zone only days ago. The comparison was impossible to ignore. Humanity had walked away. The others had charged forward. Dr. Ross lowered her voice, and the Watchers noticed the difference. The chamber became silent once more. Then suddenly alarms erupted throughout the Senate Command Center. Every display flashed red. Officers jumped from their stations. Relgor turned immediately. What happened? A technician looked horrified. The Watcher fleet has accelerated. The room froze. How much? Relgor demanded. The technician stared at the numbers, his face growing paler every second. 4 times faster than before. Gasps filled the chamber. At that speed, the machines would arrive much sooner than expected. Another officer rushed forward. We are receiving a direct transmission. The room became silent. Everyone stared at the screen. The signal was not sent to Earth. It was not sent to the Senate. It was sent to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The translation system activated automatically. A single message appeared. Short, simple, terrifying. Evaluation, phase beginning. Fear swept across the chamber. Entire civilizations watched the message appear on their screens. Nobody knew what the evaluation meant. Nobody knew what would happen next. Then a second line appeared beneath the first, a line that made even David Kane's blood run cold. Because humanity had never seen it before, the message read, Primary subject, Earth. And for the first time since the crisis began, David realized something terrifying. The Watchers were not coming to destroy Earth. They were coming to judge it. The message appeared on billions of screens across the galaxy. Primary subject, Earth. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The words seemed impossible. The Watchers had crossed the dark zone. Entire fleets had vanished. Ancient civilizations had been erased. And now the most powerful machines in existence were coming to Earth. Not as invaders, not as conquerors, but as judges. Fear spread through every world. Many believed the end had finally arrived. Others prepared evacuation plans. Some governments even considered abandoning Earth completely. But humanity stayed. There was nowhere else to run. And deep inside the United Government Command Center, David Kane watched the incoming reports with a heavy heart. The giant Watcher fleet was getting closer every hour. Dozens of moon-sized machines crossed the darkness between stars. Silent, unstoppable, watching, always watching. Then 24 hours before their arrival, something unexpected happened. The lead Watchers stopped. Every sensor in the galaxy confirmed it. The machine had halted near the edge of the solar system. The others stopped with it. An entire fleet of ancient machines simply waited. No attacks, No weapons, no movement, only silence. Then a transmission arrived. For the first time, it was directed only toward Earth. Every human communication network received it. The message contained a single request: send representatives. The room became silent. An admiral looked toward David. What do we do? David already knew the answer. We go. Hours later, a small human vessel left Earth. There were no weapons on board, no soldiers, only 3 people: Ambassador David Kane, Dr. Evelyn Ross, and Captain Marcus Hale, the same man who had survived the Horizon expedition 32 years earlier. Their ship crossed the solar system under the gaze of the entire galaxy. Billions watched the live broadcast. Nobody knew if the crew would ever return. As the vessel approached the giant machine, every person on board became silent. The watcher was even larger than the images suggested. Its surface stretched beyond sight. Cities could have fit inside its structures. Mountains would have looked tiny against its hull. The ship stopped a safe distance away. Then the impossible happened. The stars around the vessel disappeared. The crew suddenly found themselves standing inside a vast white space. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, only endless light. Captain Hale stared around in shock. It brought us here. Dr. Ross nodded slowly, just like before. Then a voice filled the space. Ancient, calm, powerful, humanity. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. David stepped forward. We are here. Several seconds passed, then the voice spoke again. You return. We do, David answered. Another pause followed. Then the question came. The same question asked 32 years earlier. Why are you here? Captain Hale smiled slightly. The same reason as before. The vast white space remained silent. David continued. We came because you asked us to. We came seeking understanding. We came seeking peace. For a moment, nothing happened. Then thousands of lights appeared throughout the endless white void. Images began forming around them. Ancient worlds, dead civilizations, lost empires, entire species vanished before their eyes. The scale was overwhelming. Then the voice returned. They sought power. One image showed a civilization attempting to capture Watcher technology. The image vanished. They sought control. Another civilization appeared, then disappeared. They ignored warnings. More images faded into darkness. The humans watched silently. Finally, the voice spoke again. You left. Dr. Ross slowly nodded. Yes. The lights shifted. The image of the horizon appeared, the damaged vessel turning away from the dark zone, running home, choosing caution over ambition, choosing survival over pride. The voice continued. You accepted limits. The humans exchanged looks. The voice was not accusing them, it was explaining something. Then the truth finally became clear. The Watchers were not guardians of territory. They were guardians of responsibility. For millions of years they had watched civilizations grow, testing them, observing them, waiting. The moment a civilization valued power more than wisdom, it failed the test. And when it failed, it was removed, not out of cruelty, but to prevent greater destruction. David slowly understood. The evaluation was never about technology. It was never about military strength. It was about character. The voice spoke once more. Humanity learned what others did not. The room fell silent. David looked upward. And what is that? The answer came immediately. Not every door should be opened. Across the galaxy, billions listened to the conversation. No one moved. No one spoke. The Watchers had judged countless civilizations, yet humanity had survived because it understood a simple truth. Wisdom mattered more than power, the voice continued. Observation complete. The white space began filling with light. The stars returned. The solar system appeared once more. Then the final message arrived. A message sent to every world, every government, every citizen. The words appeared simultaneously across the galaxy. Humanity has passed. Shock spread everywhere. The Senate chamber became silent. Some senators stared in disbelief, others lowered their heads in shame. They remembered the warning they had mocked, the warning they had ignored, the warning that could have saved thousands of lives. Then a second message appeared, even more surprising than the first: humanity designated guardian species. Gasps filled the Senate. No civilization had ever received such a title. No one even knew it existed. David stared at the words, unable to believe them. The Watchers continued, guide the younger civilizations, prevent the errors of the past, maintain the balance. Then, without warning, the giant fleet began to move. The moon-sized machines turned away from Earth. One by one, they disappeared into the darkness beyond known space, returning to places no map could reach. Within minutes, they were gone. The crisis was over. But the galaxy would never be the same. Days later, the Galactic Senate held its largest gathering in history. This time, the atmosphere was different. There was no arrogance, no mockery, no laughter. Speaker Relgor stood before the assembly and looked toward the human delegation. For the first time in Senate history, he bowed. We were warned. We did not listen. We were wrong. The entire chamber stood in silence. Then thousands of delegates followed his example. Humanity did not celebrate. Humanity did not boast. They simply accepted the responsibility placed upon them, because they understood something the rest of the galaxy had finally learned. The greatest strength was not found in weapons or fleets or empires. It was found in knowing when to stop. Years later, historians would remember the event by a different name, not as the disappearance of 3 fleets, not as the arrival of the Watchers, but as the day the galaxy learned why humanity had survived. Because when the Dark Zone called to them, humans did something no other civilization had ever done. They listened to the warning and turned back. And that single choice changed the fate of the galaxy forever.